Today we're going to be drawing the thought process, which is a pretty hilarious picture. When I drew it, it definitely made me laugh a lot. Just the idea of a cat kind of sitting in the alley, but instead of digging in the garbage, he's just thinking about his entire life. And something about that was really great. So I really like this picture. And on the back page, it tells you a lot about that. Tells you the story and the ideas and everything. So that's the one I'm going to work on today. And I figure we'll go for about an hour, and then that should be enough. But feel free to draw it however you'd like to draw it. Like I said, I'm using colored pencils. I'm going to use, I think they're mostly Prismacolor. And what do we got? Some kind of avocado green, orange, ochre, sienna brown, very nice. This famous one called black, violet, rouge Tucson, or Tucson red, and aquamarine. And so what this is obviously, you guys probably know, Kopialine pages are like lighter shades of color, and then you draw lines on top. So what I'm going for is like, I'm going to take, for instance, I'll start with green here. I think it'll be available to watch later. I think so, it should be. Yeah, I believe that's a feature. This is our first live stream, so we'll see. I'll hope so. That's what I'm going to hope for. Otherwise, you can always join us tomorrow, or the next 5 days. And it'll end on Saturday, so we'll do it Saturday too. So I'll start with green, because that's just what I want to start on. And I'm gonna put dark lines on these lighter greens, and that just should make it pop. If I did black on everything, it kind of mutes it all, and that's not as fun. In the end, you end up with, I guess, a different sort of picture. And so when I'm drawing, I tend to just start wherever I like. And then if I get bored of an area, I'll move pretty freely to another area. That's something you may or may not want to try, but I think it's important to keep it fun for yourself when you're drawing. So if you start getting like tired or like overwhelmed with one area you're working on, it's probably better to move on to something that is interesting to you, and then you can come back to something. You can come back to that area you've left when it's interesting again, and that way you can just kind of keep going and keep enjoying it. So feel free to ask questions during this. I'll be happy to answer some, especially if you have like any burning questions about art. Like, let's say you've got this and you're kind of going through some foundational epiphanies. Like, you're like, how do I hold my pencil? I'm having trouble seeing my paper through the pencil because the pencil's in the way. Those are fundamental questions, and they're tricky to try to answer for me, but because I've been drawing for so long, but I'd be happy to. So my style is really comes from a few people. Drew Struzan was a huge influence on my drawing style. The shapes of my lines, a lot of that comes from him, just as he draws really beautifully. And you'd know him if he did like movie posters, like Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, and The Hobbit, Star Wars. He did everything. So those are looking pretty good. And you don't have to use colored pencils to follow along with me here. But I'm going to switch from trees now. I'm going to work on my cat because he's sitting here looking pretty awesome. And I am going to use black for him because he's a bit gray. And I try to take my time. I've seen a lot of people, they'll do one single line everywhere, and that's cool. You can do that. I like to start at a thicker point and then taper it off, let it become a bit thin. And I think that's just part of my style. I notice it just adds a bit more depth when I'm drawing, which I like. Well, the camera is rigged so it's floating above my drawing, which took me years to do well. Yeah, someone asked that in another chat, but hopefully everyone can see what I'm doing pretty well. It looks like the video is pretty good. So for those of you who have books, I'm curious how it's been going. Have you been finding it hard or difficult to make drawing like a part of your days? Because I know I've talked to a few people, and that's been the issue. And it is challenging. It's challenging even for artists, I think, because it's like you got to keep picking it up, or you'll never do it. So one of the tricks I'll talk about, just because nobody's asking anything yet. When you're drawing, you want to think about where the light is going. So black doesn't really exist very well in nature, outer space, things like that. But the only places black really kind of exists is where light is absent. So when I'm drawing a character like this, I'm not going really heavy on my lines, except for areas where, like in here, where there's gonna be less light. That's an area I would emphasize more. The bottom sides of things. Top side might be lighter, bottom side, less light's gonna get there. So it makes sense to make it thicker and a little bit darker. And the same is true when we're painting anything. It's like you're really painting light. And that's maybe an advanced concept, but it's important to think about light, because that's really what makes up everything. Everything is kind of visible, and that's what this whole thing's about, is visibility. And this process, the copiographic process, pretty exciting to me. When I came up with it, it was pretty awesome, because I would have loved it as a kid, but as an adult and as a professional artist, it's still really exciting to me. Because often I actually don't really want to come up with ideas. I don't want to create all the time. Sometimes I just want to draw lines, draw nice looking lines, because that's a big part of what I enjoy about drawing. So a copiographic book makes that actually possible for me. So I can work on my, let's say, mechanical skills, or even just enjoy it, kind of relax and make some nice looking lines. And that's probably unique to an artist who works and does a lot of art. I'm sure more amateur artists are more like, I don't even know how to make a little line. Now you can see this. I'm going to make him, I put a little bit of highlight in there. I just didn't fill his eye in completely, so it's a little bit highlighted. And that just gives him a little more depth. So I'm going to try to draw these whiskers, but these whiskers are kind of long, so I might practice the movement before I do it. So, but I want to just put my pencil down and drag it a little bit. I don't need to press it and follow the whole line. Just want to make the marks enough that it's getting put down exactly how really what I'm going after, you know. And if I want it darker, I go back in and I just add a little bit more to where I would like it. And you don't have to draw these in the way I'm doing it. This is just how I'm trying it, and it might work out, it might not. It might be heavy-handed, so maybe I'll lighten it up if I'm not liking how dark they are. You know, and one thing I learned as I became a better at drawing was there can be a certain elegance to your lines, you know, a certain lightness, and that kind of can come through for your character. It really kind of can bring a different feeling to what you're drawing. And this probably is my favorite part of this whole picture, is this tail here. I just love how the tail like rolls over. The gradient I put on there really makes it look round. And then it folds under and it really kind of looks flat, like a piece of paper. And I don't know, that's just really fun to me. Someone asked me yesterday about drawing circles. And I think it's the same as straight lines. You really just take it, you know, really one centimeter at a time, 1 millimeter at a time. I think the expectation is I should just be able to go, wha-bam, have a great, like, perfect line, but I think you can learn to do that. It's not necessary. This is definitely a meditative process where you're kind of having these intimate little moments with your lines in your hand and movement. And I'm not even going to draw this straight because my hand turns better this way. So I'm just going to keep rotating with it. Add a little texture as I go. Because this is fur, this is not just like plastic. Sorry for the sound. Let's see. So I'm gonna go back to green now. I think my cat's looking pretty great. One sec. I'm seeing questions. I just gotta. Let's see. How should I think about the lighting and shading given it's a nighttime scene? Yeah, that's interesting. Really, if you want to do shading, then that's what you would think about. You would think about the lighting. You could work on just the line work and keep it very, very minimal. If you want to shade it more, then you have to figure out where your light sources are. That means, where is the light coming from? The moon is a big light source, so it would actually glow on the back side of him. That's why there's a little highlight here. The sides of these clouds are already highlighted based on the moonlight. The only other light source would be maybe the sky, but there's not a lot of cloud cover actually, so it wouldn't be the sky. So the only other light source would be artificial. You'd have to think about, is there a lamp up here somewhere I can't see? So maybe it's lighting up his face and it would go darker back here. Maybe it goes darker on his arm. And then you're thinking about form and going around the objects. So let's see, I'm going to work on some trees again. So I picked an hour because an hour seems to be a pretty good amount of time. After about an hour, I feel like I need a break anyway. So I figure maybe we can just draw and chat today for about an hour, and then tomorrow we can do the same. And if we want to change it at some point, we could certainly do that. If it's like an hour is just not enough. You want to hang out more. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe it's possible. And I got to decide what I want to get to today, because an hour will run out. And normally these aren't meant to be done in an hour. You know, I might draw fast, so please don't feel the pressure to do what I'm doing as fast as I'm doing it. Let's see. So I'm seeing some questions. Yeah. Originally I did make the images without the lines. Well, actually, no, that's not true. So this is an art style I came up with called copiography. And the way I do it is, you know, that I draw the picture. So I draw all the lines already, and then I'll remove the lines, create the color, and that kind of thing. Now I'm gonna move on to the fence because I just want him to feel a little more grounded. So I definitely want to work on that part today. And so what I like about the fence versus him, like in art, you really got to think about contrast. You know, so he's very curvy, very organic, right? Lots of moving arcs and circular shapes, where the fence is, at least on the angular parts, very straight and solid, and that's good contrast. And that's just adds a deeper quality to images. It adds something that's a little bit more attractive about it. So I'm going to kind of emphasize the hard lines. And you can see it kind of starts to pop immediately. I think what's great about these, someone once said, like, these pictures, they don't actually need lines. And it's kind of true. Like, this kind of art can stand on its own, but when you add lines, man, it just like brings it to life. That's really fun. See, I'm not really answering questions very well. One sec. I'm still new to live streaming, so I have to actually figure out the where the chat is. I have opened another window here. Bear with me. Okay, so Vashti, your daughter asked, I heard from another favorite artist that everything is made out of straight lines or half circles and stuff like that. Is that true? Yeah, I think that's fairly true. One of the things we talk about in this, it's actually something we talk about in the book here. I'll show you. The back of the book, we talk about shape familiarity. And so that's essentially this idea. So in this one we show different pictures from our book, and you see how a circle is a tree and an eye and a planet and a flower. That's essentially true. If you look, there's arcs, there's arcs, there's arcs, there's lines, there's lines, there's lines, there's arcs. So when you're drawing in a book like this, let's say you're not very familiar with drawing, you learn intuitively. So just by making arcs and lines all the time, you kind of learn, you teach your hand to make those shapes, and you can learn a little bit more that way. Like, you get more familiar with it. And that's essentially true. You could break down images that way. But it's also true that you can actually, I think that's mostly true with line art. Because I could make a picture using no lines and no circles. And that's what you would use as form. So that would be a picture that it has only shading. Now, what you would end up with there are, you would still have, most likely you would have edges. But even that, you could do one with no edges. You start to become, it should become quite abstract at that point. So maybe all of that has something to do with, like, creating things that have very, maybe iconic or understandable forms, like from a distance. Yeah, Amy, I think it would be good for people to do with the coronavirus thing. That's what this was about. This was about, like, hey, maybe let's give back a little bit and help people, give something for people to do that's kind of interesting and new. And there's a lot of people that bought these books, so we just want to engage with them and encourage them to draw, because they're quite fun, and maybe people just need to kind of discuss it or be around it a little bit. So Amy also asked, how did I learn to draw? I just learned to draw through sheer practice. I started drawing when I was younger because my father had cancer, and it just kind of helped me cope with stress, so it was a really good way to self-regulate. And even through times of stress growing up, I self-regulated with drawing. So we've talked to some educators about that, because drawing actually is a really positive way to self-regulate when you're feeling a lot of emotions, or you're just kind of like going through things and you need to kind of express that. And I'd been doing it my whole life, so inevitably I got better. I had to kind of stay a little bit critical in not really a just beat myself up way, but trying to see my limitations and overcome them continually. So Joel says, I've noticed that you're very good at knowing when to use a hard line, dark line, and when you draw very lightly. How do you know when to draw hard and when to go light? That's a good question. So a lot of that is my understanding. That's just my ideas of how I want to present the thing I'm working on. And having practiced so much, so drawn so much, I've made the mistakes over and over, saying, I don't know what'll happen if I do it this way, so I'm going to do it. And then I do it and I ruin my drawing. And that used to be a thing that would stop me from drawing. You would do a drawing and get to a certain point and then be like, oh, this is good, I better stop, I'm going to ruin it. And then at some point I had to talk myself, down from that and just say, you know what? I am going to screw up over and over and over, and that's okay. I'm going to draw a lot. And just allow myself to make mistakes. So now I've kind of learned, maybe I have set rules that I use when I'm drawing. One of my rules is I like thick lines on the outside. So, for instance, this building I'm working on, I'm using violet now. And I'll do an outline, but I'm not going to make it a hard outline all the way. I'm going to just kind of play with it, make it appealing to me, so I take my time, and I do a little bit of forethought, so I'm going to make this line, I know that, so I start dancing with it, you might say, and I like the idea of it going a little bit and stopping, and that's it. That's my line. So these windows, I might just do lighter, because now they're on the inside of my drawing. And I don't want to have it all look the same. I want it to kind of, play with each other. So you have some contrast, you have a nice dark line, and then some light lines. And it's simple to me that way. That's a good, simple rule to kind of consider. But I do have other rules, like when I go into a corner, for instance here, I'll go thicker in the corners. And if I do that all the way around my drawing, I follow that rule that I've set for myself, I get this consistent result from that rule. And that creates a style. And you can come up with any number of rules, and that's part of the creative part of drawing. My girlfriend Jenna, she creates her own rules as well. She'll come up with patterns for what she's working on. Like the tiger page. I think it was called the Thirsty Tiger, I think. She has some really interesting patterns on the fur that I wouldn't have thought to do, but was really cool to see because she's doing it in a way that it's still attractive, but she's using pattern. That was her rule. And so she had this like zigzag, little zigzag dots all the way around her tiger, and it was really neat to see. Okay, what would you say to someone who doesn't believe they can draw? Maybe someone who's been discouraged. Yeah, there's not a lot you can say to someone who believes they can't draw. If they came to me and they said, I can't draw, help me please, I would say, okay, number one, you can make a mark on paper with a pencil, right? And they would say yes. I'd say, okay, then you can draw. And then you kind of have to figure out what they mean. What I can't draw. What does that mean? Oh, you can't draw like, Michelangelo? Or Da Vinci? No, yeah, that's not easy. You're talking about advanced drawing then. I can't draw really, really well, but I can draw. And then, you just bring it down to the reality, which is like, okay, so you can draw a little bit. And then everyone says, you should see me draw a stick man. And I say, yeah, I would like to see you draw a stick man, because that's a good place to start, actually. Just draw something kind of basic. I'm actually going to do some hatching here. Create some shading. And I would just encourage them to try, if that's something they want to actually pursue. I made these books for people who, maybe struggle to draw and would still actually like to try it. Because this is great. Everything's done. It's all ready for you to just do lines. So I've actually removed part of the process, which is figuring out what to draw, figuring out how to do it, and just giving you something to trace, essentially. But doing that, it still isn't easy. You still have to make the marks, but then now you're drawing a picture. And there's a certain small win that you get with that. You get a certain sense of accomplishment, because believe it or not, these are still your lines. No one's going to draw this and have it look like mine. That's just not how it works. And then so we figure, spend time doing this, learn to make drawing a part of your life, and then hopefully learn things like shape familiarity or iconic shapes, like the way I drew trees here, the way I drew this fence, the way I drew these buildings and these clouds and this moon. Those are iconic shapes. You can draw a skyline like this in any number of ways. They're just squares. And you can be creative and make it up. Clouds are a line with round shapes on top, over and over and over, everywhere. And then you can start to construct those and design those. So you say, okay, I want it to be more of a tall cloud, and I want it to wisp at the end. And so then you start to make more fine choices. But in the end, these patterns are kind of chaotic and creative, but they're all rules. They're all like simple ideas. They're concepts. What country? I would say New York. New York, USA. Someone says, what country is that cat in? Yeah, I assume that's where it is. I think this is a Sears Tower or something. I'm not that skilled in geography, but I always assumed he was an alley cat from New York. Because when I grew up, you always saw like cartoons with alley cats. So I hope everyone's trying to draw along. It's okay if you're just watching too. I probably would try to do more advanced things. There's still lots to do on this picture. I want to do the top of these trees. I probably want to get to some clouds, but I'm definitely enjoying where I'm at. I might take time now to stop doing lines because that can be a bit overwhelming, as funny as that may sound. And I might just start like doing some shading, which might be just lines, and just go around because I kind of want to add some more depth. So a rule for this might be I'm going to make it darker at the ends. I'm going to rotate it so the lines are all kind of following the form of his body. And by doing this, create more three-dimensional shapes and maybe a character that's a little more alive. I guess it could be LA. I don't think they have buildings like this in LA. That's the only downside. But it could be. It's fairly flat. See, I do want to work on these trees a little. Hey Eric, welcome. So yeah, I think I might want a darker green for this too. I'm not too sure. There's a highlight here on this forest. So I'm not going to go too hard on this highlight. I'm not going to be too precise here either because it's in the trees. So if you kind of are a little bit more chaotic with it, it'll actually look a little bit more natural. So letting my lines kind of bleed into each other. The outside might be a bit different. You might want to be more precise there, but that's just a choice, style choice. I think I'm going to do a thicker line though because this green is actually not super dark. And I want these trees to stand apart from the background, and that's actually a good thing to point out, which is making this line a bit thicker on the outside will push the city back and bring the forest forward a little. So a cool thing you guys might try to do tonight, since we're going to be doing this during the week, if you plan to come back, do a bit of drawing tonight, just a little bit, and see what kind of questions come up for you. Because you may actually find that you struggle with something, or that you've always had some burning question that you wish you knew the answer to. And a guy like me who has faced all of these things over and over, I have my own solutions to them. Some that I've learned and picked up along the way, and some that I had to figure out myself. Or some that I just straight up do it my own way because I feel like people do it wrong. Okay, so now I'm going to work on these clouds, but I'm not going to press down hard at all. I want them to be light. The reason is I don't want them to, I still want them to feel kind of fluffy. So if they're really hard dark lines, they're going to be just like this building, which is made of concrete, you know. So if I keep it a little bit lighter, don't press down very hard, you know, make the edges like it's okay to have a blurry line here. Maybe use a little bit more of the edge, like let your pencil flatten out. Just use that kind of flatter side. So I like the way that's looking. Curious how I'll do the moon. So the moon is actually a full circle. So I could do a little bit of the rest of the moon here. Because this dark part is actually, that's the Earth. That's the Earth's shadow blocking the sun light. So it's actually still a round object up there, a full sphere. And once in a while you can see this. You can see that actually. But the moon is so bright from the sun's light that usually you miss that part. It like overtakes that. So as an artist, like I always felt like it made me a bit more sensitive. I had to be a little bit more intellectual in some ways than I even was capable of for a long time. Because to know things like that, to know things like lighting and how things are depicted, that's kind of scientific. You really have to analyze the world and understand how things are put together and how they work to really depict them well. So I always felt like I had to be a bit of an investigator to try to learn a lot, just to say okay, well, how do reflections work? Like, how does it actually work so that I can paint a reflection really well? You know, when I'm drawing a lake or I'm drawing a mirror, because then you got to think about, okay, there's also perspective, where the perspective lines come in with things like that. So I tend to draw at an angle, and that's, for some reason, I think it's because that's how the alignment of my hand, it's easier this way. Where if I'm drawing this way, I'm coming in at an angle, and it just makes it harder to make these kind of shapes. If I'm doing it this way, I just go back and forth, and it makes it easier. It's not the best for video, but whatever. Well, I don't know if the moon's flat, but it's definitely hollow. Everyone knows it. Everyone else that doesn't think it's flat knows that. I wrote a book, or came up with a book idea and co-wrote it with a friend of mine. And it was actually about, it was called Atlantis. And the whole idea was that the moon had come to our solar system at some point, and Atlanteans actually resided in it. It was like an ark bringing life to our solar system. And so it was actually hollow. And it was Atlantis. It was called Atlantis. And I liked playing with those ideas. I was never huge into those real conspiracies. They just seemed like, wow, these are stories and what do I know? But it's still fun to play with it. So the book was called Atlantis, Ship of the Gods, and it was pretty fun to explore for a while. So you don't have to draw these windows. I think I'm just kind of giving them a little TLC, tender loving care, I think. Just a little square, which for me, I mean, it's push up, pull over, pull down, pull over. It's actually similar to drawing leaves. You learn general leaf shapes and then you can throw them all over the place. Jenna asked here, what can you do to add more texture to the cat's fur? Okay, so you're dealing mostly with line art. One thing I would do to add lots of texture is you just, on the edges here, just do little like scribble type shapes or little marks like this. You put those wherever you want, you put them inside. Anywhere where you think the fur might stick out would be cool. And that'll make him a bit more scruffy. If you want him to be like a well-kept alley cat, then maybe don't do that, because he probably licks his fur so well that he's like super clean. Otherwise, what you can do is, let's say this shape here is where his arm is rounded. Then you could just take on this shape, you do some fur type line, then go in and you just add texture as you see fit. You could also follow these style of shapes, so more angular fur. Put some triangles in there, the way the direction of the fur would probably go. So I'm gonna work on the fence again. I feel like that needs some more love. So it would be really awesome if you guys could, if you're on Instagram, take pictures of your drawings. And, what do they call it? Tag us in it. It's like at Kopialine. Put that in your description when you post it. You can even do it on Facebook, I believe. Or even use hashtag Kopialine. And, maybe with this one, I think we have different hashtags for each one. So this one might be hashtag Kopialine, the thought process. If you want to go through all that, that would be really awesome, because we would love to see it. Otherwise, maybe if you could, just send it to us. Take a screenshot, direct message us on Instagram or on Facebook, and we'll share it, because we actually really want to see that stuff. That's the kind of thing that keeps us going, is seeing that people are enjoying the product we make. And don't be ashamed, don't be afraid if your drawing's no good or it doesn't look like mine. It's like, that really doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that you did it your way and you had a good time. We impose these expectations on ourselves that we should be like professional at everything we're doing, that I need to make the best product. And that's actually called fixed mindset. And it's not about the product you're doing, it's about the process. If you're learning, if you're having fun, if you're growing, discovering something new about yourself, like, that's what we care about. Like, that's the whole point of this. So I made this for myself, but I made it for people who quit drawing. Really, in the end, it was for kids who wanted, something fun to do, like a coloring book, but they didn't want to color, they wanted to draw. And people who gave up drawing when they were little, and now they wish they hadn't given it up. They want to try it again, but they have to start from the very bottom, try to figure it all out. That sucks. Like, that's hard. And I kind of knew, I was like, there must be some way that people can do this. And this is it. This is my answer. The only thing this really doesn't solve is your willingness to do it. So I'm going to sit down today and I'm going to spend a half an hour or 5 minutes doodling in my book. I can't solve that. That's that whole, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That's that problem. So if anything, I would encourage all of you to just spend a little bit more time doing it. And I need to as well. I'm definitely no different. I'm a professional artist and I still struggle to sit myself down and just draw. But it is meditative and it helps self-regulate. So there's something about like spending time doing this that is therapeutic, and often it's the missing piece is having a creative outlet that just gives you freedom to kind of run amok. Because if you don't have something like that, then your life might just be complete order, meaning boring. You just might not be engaging in part of who you are, which is you are a creator as well. You create. You have that capacity. So if you don't have an outlet for it, then you might actually be feeling a bit more empty or purposeless, or unfulfilled. So drawing is a great way to do that, and I tried to make it as easy as I could. So this is one where, I don't know if you can see the circle here. The inner circle, I just did the thick part on the upper part of it because I want this to be seen as like more of a 3D object. So on the outside I would do it on the bottom, on the inside I would do it on the top. On the top it would be very light. And that's going to create more form, more depth to that part. Now deciding where those go and how those go, that's a bit of skill, a bit of understanding. But I don't want to spend a lot of time here because this container part doesn't need to be super detailed for me. It could be for you. You could make this thing look beautiful, absolutely beautiful. There's all the opportunity here to do that, but I want to get to the stuff inside. So I chose this, what is this? Orange ochre for my banana. I want to see how it works. It's definitely orange. I'll probably go over it with a darker color too, but this will give it a little more life because it's a brighter color. And truthfully, it should be a rotten banana sitting in the garbage. So maybe I'll give it like a black spot. I mean, who throws away a perfectly good banana? So one thing I like about iconic shapes is hard lines. So on the outside of these shapes, I'm really gonna like exaggerate the simplicity. And to me, that will just make them much stronger. Because the first thing we actually see is the outline or the silhouette when we look at something. And this one, because it's metal, I'm not going to go all the way around. I'm just going to do the same top or bottom. And that's a reflection. That's like a highlight, like a metal highlight idea. I did grab a red for this, just a little red. So we got about 10 minutes left. If anyone wants to ask any questions right now, feel free. And then, yeah, it'd be great to see what everyone did today. And if you want to work on it for the rest of the day, get back to me and send it in. That would be really cool. Now I'm using brown for this one, but I actually do want it to be separate from that fence, so I think I'm going to make sure all of these have black on the outside. Wow. I think that's everything. So what I would probably do at this point is I would go back over it. A lot of drawing for me is like redrawing. So you draw a little bit, you go somewhere else, come back, and you figure out maybe what it's missing. Like I can see that I want this to be a little darker, because it just seemed a bit out of balance. And I'm just looking to see what things I can do to really help it. So even here, this shape in the fence, it's not getting as much light, so I want to put it into darkness a little bit. I'm going to use my black to really push that a little more, at least at the top. And give it some proper depth. Let's see, I want to add little like black spots in the fence where light is not getting the most. And even here on this board on the bottom, I think I'm going to spend some time on this too, because this is lower than all this stuff, so it naturally is going to get less light, just because all the light sources are up at the top. So I'm going to do a little bit of a light, like maybe more of a direct light on this. So what I would do is, if my light source is coming up from up here somewhere, I would imagine it's hitting this board's blocking the light, and it's going off in this direction. So let's say all of this is now blocked by light. Or sorry, blocked by the board. So the light is only be able to reach here and here. And that's true for everything. You could do that with the legs. If I did, let's say, that same light source, I draw the same shape of the legs, except now this line is based on how far away from the fence they are, which is really can be tricky to figure out. So a lot of times I wing it, because I'm not too sure myself. And then by doing that, it adds more depth. Let's see, I might add a little bit of purple, just for the heck of it, on these trees. Make them a little darker. Black, if you do black everywhere, it kind of kills the life of a drawing. So if you're going to add some dark somewhere, you could always consider adding a darker color, keeping it alive. That's not to say, though, that black doesn't have its place. So. All right, I think that's looking pretty great. That's a lot of drawing there. So this one, I'll read this one, because that's the one thing I didn't do. It's called The Thought Process. It says, "Can you believe this? cat sitting on top of a fence thinking deeply about life. Well, that's exactly what we see here. His name is Dale, and he's a unique feline in his neighborhood. He has wanted to be a poet his whole life, but can never find the right words. Probably because he's a cat, and doesn't have the ability to speak beyond the word meow, which he likes to belt out when he's reminding his master about feeding time. Sometimes we have trouble finding the right way to express ourselves, and drawing can be a wonderful way to say the things we find hard to say any other way. So, thank you very much. Yes, it'll be at the same time tomorrow, and thank you for joining me.